We're going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. This is the Washougal City Council workshop meeting of Monday, January 27th. Rose, could you call the roll, please?
Councilmember McDaniel.
Here.
Councilmember Boger.
Here.
Councilmember Lindsay.
Here.
Councilmember Shoemaker.
Here.
Councilmember Freeman.
Here.
Councilmember Greenlee. And Councilmember Plinsky.
Thank you. Paul is here. He's just grabbing something. And Councilmember Polinsky will not be here this evening. We're going to dispense with public comments since we have no public here. And go to new business. Finance. David, are you taking this one?
Yes.
It's a quiet evening.
So just very briefly, we wanted to give you a quick update on some changes that we will be proposing to the cable television code and the process that we'll be following for that. We won't get into any details tonight other than just a general overview and the process. So we'll talk about the background and purpose of why we're doing, we will be proposing this, and then what the next steps are. So our current cable television code is outdated, and I have to say it's outdated from the 1980s, but it is outdated. Some other context is that the Comcast franchise is up for renewal, and I'll have more on that. Because the current code is so outdated, the changes that will be proposed are extensive. And that's why we wanted to have this quick check-in tonight as just a precursor to getting into more detail at your next session. Back when this code was first promulgated in the 1980s, basically the code was the vehicle by which we governed our relationship with the folks that provide cable TV, as opposed to the franchise agreement, although there's a little back and forth between the two. And so just about every little thing that you can imagine relative to the relationship between, say, a Comcast and us is in the code. However, some of it's outdated, inconsistent with the current franchise, the one that we need to renew. It describes insurance requirements, just as one example, and those are the sorts of things we handle in the franchise agreement. So a major overhaul is necessary, and again, the changes will be extensive. We've been working with Don extensively on this, as well as Comcast and Frontier, who are currently our two franchise holders for cable TV. And the code that Don used as an example is a recently updated City of Vancouver code. Now, we're not using it identically, but he took.
Who worked on that one?
Judy Zeider.
Judy did that? Yeah.
She's retired now.
Oh.
I worked a lot with Judy as well with Brent when I was there, yeah. So what you can expect coming up is that your next meeting on the 10th, in your packet for the workshop and at the workshop, there will be the extensive changes. You'll see a document that has just lots and lots of strikeouts, lots of things would be eliminated, and then there's some underlined language, some new language. It will also provide, I didn't mention this here, we'll also provide a clean version too. So you'll have the underline and strikeout and then what it is when you accept all of those changes. And then our proposed process is that upon your review on the 10th, then at your next meeting on the 24th, it would be ready for your adoption. It would be an ordinance to change that code. As I mentioned, the Comcast franchise is up, and so on the 24th in workshop, we will have that agreement for your review with potential adoption then at the next meeting after that on March 10th. So that was just a quick heads up so that you know what to expect and not to be surprised when you see just lots of underline and lots of strikeouts. That'll be extensive. Any questions?
I know I mentioned it earlier, but I want to mention it again. I really want to require that if a franchisee is digging up our streets or or digging up someone's lawn, even through a subcontractor, that the name of the franchisee must be on the equipment somewhere,
Right.
clearly visible.
I think you mentioned that at the,
Yeah,
The annual planning
Comcast
session.
does that already. It's corporate policy. Comcast will have no trouble with this. Frontier and Northwest Natural don't, as a matter of course, do that. Clark Public Utilities, by and large, doesn't use subcontractors. The only one that they use that I'm aware of is Splenda, which does tree removal.
right. So Don is looking into that for
Okay.
us, about the efficacy of either having it in the code and in the Comcast agreement, or both, and whether there's anything that we need to be aware of as we would seek to pursue that. We're dealing with the cable TV code and the Comcast agreement, so we can deal with our TV folks. The other ones we'd have to deal with separately, but same thing. So yes,
Just as a, not wanting to tell too many stories out of school, but as a former fraternity boy, I'm aware of some people in Boston who simply went out and put on orange shirts and helmets and borrowed a piece of equipment and dug up a street and then left for lunch as a fraternity prank in front of another fraternity house. So we don't have any fraternities here, but
MIT students did that?
I'll never tell.
Anyway,
We were close to Boston University, so.
okay, any other questions for David on the cable TV ordinance? Okay, more to follow. Rules of procedure.
I guess I have this one too. I don't really have anything to show, but on the agenda tonight is for your regular meeting is a resolution that implements your stated wishes from the annual planning session, where we talked about the meeting schedule in the town halls, the efficacy of the town halls, and the direction that we received was to maintain the meeting schedule as it is currently in the rules, but to back out the town halls. So at your regular meeting tonight, under new business, is a resolution that simply strikes the section on town halls. So a very simple change to the rules based on your direction from the planning session.
Any discussion on that one? We can still hold them if you want, at different times and infrequently, all that type of stuff, we
That's
can
the
still
beauty
call
of
them.
Right,
Yeah. if
right.
we-
Okay. Volunteer application review.
So this is on the agenda for work session based on some council discussion at a previous meeting. I guess there's been some feedback that the application it may be onerous for some that are considering volunteering, and they may be dissuaded from doing that because of the application. So it's a time for the council to talk about that. As the mayor mentioned when you were discussing this previously, the council asked that there be more information provided to the council when you were considering ratifying appointments that the mayor has made to some of these various boards and committees, and we would put the name forward, and maybe there'd be a letter of interest, but there wasn't a lot of information about the individual. Now, this is a prior council. Some of you were on the council at the time, but it was a prior council. So we made those changes at the pleasure of the council. We can certainly tighten it or shorten it or make any changes. We just want to make sure that when the mayor brings forward appointments for your consideration, you feel like you're able to have the information you need to affirm those appointments.
If I may speak, it was the cemetery board that asked me to bring this forward. They felt that it was too long and too much information for a volunteer who could just write a letter with their information on it, and a letter of intent with their personal information on it, so that they could be contacted if there were any questions, that it didn't need to be a 3-page application. So that's what I'm doing. We felt that the ones that could be admitted were B, C, D, E, and F, and G, and then there's a question mark by H. I don't know how much it dissuades people, I don't know, but it is a feeling there that they wanted me to bring forward.
I don't believe that we've heard anyone that has put in for anything say that, or hasn't put in for something, say that this,
Didn't bother me.
no, and quite frankly, those items you've got on there, I think they're completely appropriate for you to know why or what things that they would bring to the organization in that particular one, or any of those type of things. It's.
Is it online that they can come in and type it in? And
Well, that I don't know.
There
should be, if it's online and they can type it in, and if they want to, say, see attached letter and just put that in there, and we think their letter is appropriate, is enough to convince us to appoint them, I don't have a problem with that. You know, I don't think this is such an onerous form. You know, I want some information from potential applicants.
Is it online? Rose?
The application's online. We just don't know that it's in a Word document that they can access, so.
It's a PDF.
Can you do that? And that would make it,
That would be nice.
I read this with some care, and C and D are easily combined. You delete D, cross out the word professional, and do you have any training, experience, or community activities that relate to this position? Then E is, it's just a wording thing on that. I'd like it to be more open and friendly, just along the lines of, give us a hint as to why you wish to serve on this board or commission.
Well, do you think that would be covered in the letter of intent?
A letter of intent, technically, all a letter of intent has to say is, I'm interested in the
Okay.
position.
And that, in fact, is what prompted this to begin with, is that we've got a couple that were going, I'd be interested in filling that position. There were, you might have been one person putting in for it, nobody else to pick from. Is that valid or not?
And this would take the place of a letter of intent, correct?
Yeah, quite a few times, folks still do letters as well. And frankly,
I
to
don't
me, a
see
letter
any-
of intent would be a letter of intent to fill this out since we require it, so.
Right, well, there's nothing in the intro that says to, submit this as well as a letter of intent. So I don't know if we have anything in the code that says there must be a letter of intent?
I don't believe so. I think we just require this. I think there's probably just some long practice about people submitting letters.
Okay.
This is the
that's what I
mandatory
was-
part, not the letter of intent, it sounds like.
And F, G, and H, all of them are basically asking the question, do you have any potential conflicts of interest? So F, G, and H could be simplified to a single item. The rest of it I'm okay with.
That's true for us, but will people filling it out understand the details of what constitutes a conflict of interest? Do you need the explanation in there, in those three?
That's why you've got the three of them now.
Yes,
I don't-
you do need to,
Maybe it makes sense to combine all of the verbiage into one. I think you can still shorten it if you want that kind of thing, but it's still fundamentally just one question.
Yep.
Do we have a conflict of interest here because of you or your family member's relationship with a contractor or a supplier or an elected official or staff member or any other business, professional or business pursuit that would affect your ability to make fair and so on and so forth?
Works for me.
well, there's a statutory definition of,
I'm sorry?
there's a statutory definition of conflict of interest. Maybe you could just drop that into a footnote.
Is it clear or is it in?
No, it's not clear, but, but it's what we got.
Well, and then if you do that, then this reduces to two sides of a single page.
I like it already.
Good.
We can do a little bit of consolidation,
Yeah.
still glean the same information. I think that's essentially what your comments are, is a couple things can be rolled up, but we can still get the same info. Yeah. And we'll try to get it as a fillable form on our website.
That's nice nowadays.
Yeah, one page both sides seems,
Any other comments? We are moving through this agenda.
Oh, we can go out to dinner and sit down and have a cup of coffee.
Public comments. Larry, anything you'd like to say? Awesome. I have nothing for you at this point. Council?
I just wondered if Mitch wants to do a little prep on this marijuana hearing before the hearing or not.
I'd just assume that we do that once you've got,
Okay,
I know
all right.
we've got public that are wanting to be here as well, so.
All right.
I would just assume we put that off to the hearing itself.
I received a letter from Tina Bear up on the cemetery board about a piece of property. This Cindy Schmidt property next to the cemetery. It's wanting to sell it to the city. Shall I submit this?
Yeah, I got it too.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah, it looks like.
not anything we've seen.
Everyone got one?
We've been, I know Cindy's been in discussion with the city for a number of years. She's got a plot up there and, excuse me, bad terminology. She has acreage to the north of the cemetery. And I believe at this point, the discussion that I've heard out of Public Works and the cemetery staff is, one, they don't have the dollars to, that anywhere close to what they're asking for the property. And two, we have better than a 50-year inventory of space, supply of space.
Unless we get a outbreak of the bubonic plague or something like that.
When this came up the last time, my conversation with the team there was, do we need this property, and when would we need it? And the answer that I got was, well, maybe way down the road we might need it. However, that was uncertain based upon different trends in how our culture deals with that situation of cemeteries or cremation and all of that. And so I basically asked for some sort of a plan, if you would, about the current property that we have and how long we think that's going to provide service to our community and all of that. Similar to what we do with other facilities that we have, so that you have a feel for what you need and then figure out how you would pay for that. So the mayor and I, based on that, did not try to put that into the budget, and I don't know how we could have. We'd have to bump other stuff out or ask you to use reserves.
So she's not even on the radar, hasn't ever been. Do we know how big it is and how much she would like to have for the property?
We've had all those discussions, yes. But there are more discussions that are initiated from Cindy herself, not from staff, so.
So how big is it approximately?
I want to say 3 acres?
Wow. And it butts right up against the cemetery?
To the northeast portion of it, to the northeast section, yes, it's contiguous to it, right across the service road. But we've got there's 2 other areas to the west of there going up to 32nd that have never been opened yet. There's another one between the existing cemetery portions that's in use where we do the memorial now. There's another plot that we have, and then Cindy's is north of that yet as well. So,
This should not, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I don't know where to go with this. At the time that the property that became Heartwood Park was acquired, one of the discussions in council was, even though we thought at the time that we might have enough parkland up in that portion of the city, that the terms on the acquisition were so favorable that it made sense to acquire the property, keeping in mind that we might at some future date, exchange that parcel for some other parcel in a section of the city that was more in need of a park, or some other purpose. And that's really a lot of the discussion as to how that Heartwood property was acquired. Now, it turns out that the decision was made to turn it into a park, which is fine. But I just wonder if it is true that the terms are attractive, that we might think a little bit more broadly.
Brent?
Oh, I was going to say, this sounds to me like this should probably not be a very high priority, because we don't have a need for a cemetery space, and we've got a lot of other needs. So I don't know how much we want to pursue this.
Unless status has changed with the staff, the cemetery staff, it's a non-starter for us at all. And I'm surprised you even got a letter on it, but first I've heard of it
Coming
in
from the
probably a
board?
year.
I
What,
don't
how
know.
did she sign it?
I don't know
Says
when it arrived, there's no.
Signing it herself as the chair
Here,
of the
today.
board.
So that to me is a communication from the board.
Yes.
Have they said, have they talked about
They
this?
have talked about it, but I did not know she was writing this letter. And the addresses here, they've talked about the space for the maintenance building and that up there. So, yes, they have talked about it.
I'm noticing in here, this is the first time I've seen it, of course, there's some, it talks about a land swap and the merits of that, short of the full purchase. So that's the first I've ever heard of that. That doesn't mean that the team hasn't been discussing that. It's never come to us that I'm aware of. So, I mean, there may be something to that. It doesn't cost us anything other than, being okay with a swap, and supposedly it adds value in a number of different ways. So we could certainly take a peek at that.
Great.
So I haven't read it yet, since I just got it open. They're asking to swap, what would they consider swapping?
Yeah, I don't know. I have to get into this, but we had given her an easement so she could get a road to access her her house. It talks about a number of different things, swapping 5 acres for the city's 1.6 plus the difference in plus the difference in value. Okay.
Yeah, so hers is 5 acres.
Yeah.
Okay.
5
Didn't see that. I just saw the swapping, and the swap will eliminate Cindy's boundary line conflict with the city. So it looks like there were some things that happened in the past that probably weren't recorded or addressed properly. So we may have some cleanup to do from things from the past. But yeah, this clearly cemetery board chairperson, at least, I don't know if they voted on this, but the chairperson at least is advocating that we invest in it, and notes the 60-year inventory, but says we should do it.
Now we're talking about real estate matters in general. We had our council retreat earlier this month. We talked about our fiscal woes and all that, and then I go home after the retreat and I get my weekly Economist in the mail, and it basically says, solution to government problems, sell off your assets. And I mused about that on Facebook, and I got a comment from a former mayor who happens to be related to someone at this table. And he said that, are there some he said there are some properties the city should look at disposing of that we don't have any need for. Is that true, or has there been some discussion about that?
There could be some surplus.
And so that's I'd like to see, I'd like to see kind of an inventory of what we have at some point.
Especially since we're considering this land for a park, not the cemetery part, but this new acquisition that would help come up with some funds.
Yeah, the 2 or 3 that have been discussed, and I don't know that Suzanne has totally taken it through the Parks Board. 2 of them were small neighborhood pocket parks. a lot, building lot in size, that have no equipment and are extremely underused. I believe one of those, though, was Riverbend. And that one did go to the Parks Board, and they wanted to make sure and keep that one, so that one went off. But there's another one back behind in the middle. You'd have a tough time even finding it. That one's been discussed, and then I've also asked to get valuations and the potential for selling all the property that we don't need that surrounds the new reservoir that we put up on top of Mount Norway.
Any properties down in this area that we have?
No, the city, other than where city buildings are, we have, in Parkland, we have, I don't believe we have any other holdings.
I think that's what, I got the
Some-
impression that's what
Some of
Jeff
this
was
around this
talking about.
campus right in here, but
Yeah.
just depends on what we do for future uses in there.
You know, we have the property to the north of us across the street and abutting the railroad tracks, the parking lot, everything to the house, just the two corner houses where our neighbors own that.
I would just want to be sure that the property we have is property we have some use for, or might have some use for in the future.
Well, on the one where the reservoir is, all of that money, if we were to sell the rest of that, we had a 10-acre piece up there, and I believe we need to maintain, Dave, help me out, an acre or half an acre of it for the reservoir and the surrounding area.
And an access through. We don't
Sure,
need
We've
all
got
of
an
it.
access right onto the main road from
Is there
there.
minimum size, lot parcel size up there?
That's what they're trying to find out from the county to make sure in there. Jennifer?
Yeah, who's officing in the little house next to
In the
the?
house, we have Public Works Administration and Engineering, so we have 4 people. And they take up the whole downstairs, so the front room, and it's a meeting room, so the front room is Mickey, a conference table, Rob has the little alcove, Aaron, our engineering tech, is basically in a closet that's been converted to an office. And then there's a back bedroom, there's probably a bedroom in the back. Trevor has that as his office. And there's a bathroom and a kitchen. The upstairs really, the basement is unusable, and then the upstairs is really only usable for residential purposes.
And who's officing down at the Public Works building?
Jim Dunn is down there, the managers, and the rest of the staff, Public Works staff. So the entire Public Works team, except for the treatment plant folks who are at the treatment plant, are down the street there. So the director and assistant and the engineering staff are in the house next door, because we didn't have room for them here at City Hall. Particularly bringing IT in-house. IT's got the basement downstairs now. So that's why that's not the only reason why, but it's one of the side benefits of the library doing something different and moving out of this space someday into something better.
Yeah.
Then we would gain quite a bit of office space, and then that opens up some flexibility. It's nice having that corner lot in our portfolio, though, because, you know, down the road, as this community grows and our organization would grow probably at some point to accommodate a larger community, it gives us a lot of flexibility and options for what we want a civic center to look like someday. We're buying time now because we've re-roofed and done the HVAC and done the ADA upgrades, and we are doing the project over at the community center because we know we're here for some time. It's just the other needs that we have stand above, you know, a new city hall at this point. At least that's been our direction.
Sure.
But someday, you know, someday this facility probably need to be replaced, you know, out. So it's kind of nice to have the ground around here so that we have that flexibility, either in partnership, you know, public-private partnerships for developments or all kinds of different possibilities. But we certainly can freshen up our inventory and look at what's options. We're working on a couple of those different things more in an ad hoc way, but we could try to bring that all together. Certainly it's one-time money. You know, it doesn't solve the ongoing issue, but it certainly helps in the shorter term and softens the blow for a few years out, just like any use of one-time money.
Or it could be used for other real property acquisition needs we have.
Could tie it, could support capital purchases. That's good.
Like an inside swimming pool for our community.
The one where the reservoir was, I believe that all came from those utility reserves, and that we're never gonna recoup what was paid for the property. Very close.
If it was utility money,
To go back in utilities.
they would go back in it, but what that could do is offset, that would just be cash that we would have. And just like
Offset
the $1
rates.
million that the legislature's giving us for the plant and anything else we can get, either better financing terms than our bond, Public Works Trust Fund loans, if there's gonna be any state revolving fund, any of that money that comes in cheaper helps us stretch the existing bond that we did a couple years ago, and the next bond can be smaller, which means rate pressure gets reduced the next time we have to talk about that. So even if there's, a few $100,000 in cash, it'll help a little bit for rates. So it all helps. Might not the general fund, but we can certainly bring that forward.
Anything else from council?
I just wanted to mention that AWC Civic Action Day is the 29th and 30th of this week. Some of that is, in my mind, at this point, a dog and pony show that I'm not really interested in, but there is some important talking to the legislators that goes on. There are hearings on some important marijuana bills on the 30th. Anybody who hasn't been to the two-day thing, I think it's probably worth going, if you can. Here's the schedule.
Where is it?
Olympia.
Sorry?
Olympia.
The
I went to it last year.
other, besides marijuana, this is value capture financing is the Washington take on tax increment financing. The basic idea is that if you take a piece of ground and you put major infrastructure into it, you've substantially increased the developability and the value of the ground. And you recapture the increase in the tax to pay for the infrastructure that you put in. That bill is up also. And my favorite, the Public Works Trust Fund, there's a hearing at 1:30 on January 30th. Public Works Trust Fund, if we borrow $1 million from a tax exempt bond, we pay 4.3% on it. If we borrow $1 million, and it's a 20-year bond, maybe 25, probably 20. If we borrow the money from the Public Works Trust Fund, it's 0.75% for as much as 40 years. Even if it were 20 years, going from Public Works Trust Fund to tax exempt bond increases the annual payment 40%. It goes from $55,000 a year to over $75,000 a year, just making that change. So given all of the trouble that we've had financing our utility improvements and the potential for 32nd Stiles Road and all of the other traffic things that we need to do that are not Washington State DOT issues, the Public Works Trust Fund is a big deal. And the legislature last year swept all of that money into their general fund budget. So this is an important hearing. I'm thinking I will probably go up for that. If anyone else is interested in going up for that or any of these others, I'm happy to drive. I have a conflict. I can't stay up there the 29th, which is Wednesday. But if anybody's interested in this, I'll pass these around. I'll put the AWC blurb on top here.
You also said there's a tax increment financing bill,
Say again?
there's a tax increment financing bill going through,
A version of it.
version of it?
There's a version of it, you don't call it that in
I wouldn't say it's
Washington.
going through.
Well, it's being considered.
Right.
What are they, I'm used to, it's commonly used in California.
Right. Washington is the only state
Mm-hmm.
that does not have tax increment financing, but we're also the only
What is
state.
it,
only
LIFT, they
state-
call it local infrastructure financing tool or something like that?
We're also the only state that finances almost all of our education with property tax. And so if you capture that increment, you're really crippling the school systems. And that's been part of the bugaboo.
Well, the Supreme Court's ruled that part of it unconstitutional.
Right.
You can't even touch the school money. You can touch city and county and port district.
But the details of that are kind of, we
Well-
don't need to get into that. But in any case, there's information.
So
value.
is the bill just generally going to allow tax increment financing in the state?
There's some
Or
detail.
whatever they call it?
There's some detail there in what they're trying to do.
I also became aware of another bill that's going through the legislature that, if it passes, will be of some use. Unfortunately, the version of it now it's only cities, I think, of over 70,000 people. It would allow property tax abatement for certain development projects. If we could actually abate the property tax.
There's also a bill that's pending, nobody knows how serious it is, that would require deferral of impact fees to occupancy.
Yeah, that one doesn't affect us, so we already do that.
We offer it. Folks don't take advantage of it.
For residential?
Yeah.
We have for everything.
It's a perennial bill that comes up. AWC usually goes on the defensive for it.
We've said that we wouldn't be joining that. I think this is the second or third year that we've said that we wouldn't be joining that because for us it's a non-issue and we actually offer it, so. With the exception of school impact fees.
The bill that Councilman Greenlee's referring to is called the Value Capture Financing Bill.
And there's a little blurb for it in that stack that Jennifer has.
Is value capture financing similar to tax increment financing?
That's exactly.
In that it pledges future tax revenues?
Sort of, yeah. I mean, pledge is a little different word than I think is in the bill, but
It allows cities to impose a special property tax within an apportionment district on the incremental property value increase within the district to finance improvements within the district.
So you're taking hostage your property tax incomes for 20 to 40 years.
The increase in that specific district.
In the value.
So
Which means that down the road, schools, police, fire, water, and a whole bunch of other things are gonna be held hostage to the action that we took 10, 20, 30, 40 years before.
except that it gives us a way to finance all of those things.
Yeah, to some degree, it does, Dave, even when we do bonds and that type of thing.
Well, Oregon's done some of that.
Well, California's even,
It's a disaster.
California has just gutted a lot of schools. There was a Supreme Court case that came out in Washington in 1992 that said you can't touch this common school fund out of here. So that takes half of it off the table to begin with.
57%.
Yeah. And so all you can really deal with, you can deal with the city portion, the county portion, the port district portion, with the permission of each entity. Well, that's the way, there's a hybrid or a pilot program that I was involved with in Vancouver called the Local Infrastructure Financing Tool. They won't call it tax increment financing, but it's the same kind of thing. And in that case, the city had to they're doing it for the waterfront project and a library project, had to get permission from the port and the county to do that.
Wasn't that a test?
It's a pilot project,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And they had 5 or 6 of these in the state that the CTED or whatever it's called now had to sign off on. And it's a lot more cumbersome, and actually I think the Washington system is better. I think it might be useful in limited ways, but the wholesale way it was used in California is just gutted.
Didn't
I
work.
absolutely agree with you. One of the most fascinating experiences was I was at NLC, and the chair of the Republican Party for a county just north of Dallas, I muttered something about tax increment financing, and he went absolutely ballistic about how George W. Bush and his buddies had stolen $100 million from the people of Texas
The baseball stadium.
through the baseball stadium. And so there are, there's a list, a really appalling list of abuses. The kinds of things that have come through the Washington legislature have been very limited, and my own view is that they're, at this point, adequately protected against that kind of abuse.
I don't believe that for a minute. I look at what's happened in Oregon. They used tax increment financing. They didn't, the value didn't go up very much. In fact, it declined because of the recession. And as a result of that, they've got real problems over there.
Well, this is much more limited and much more carefully drafted than what they're doing in Oregon. Oregon's law is much closer to California than.
Well, Oregon used it to fund their light rail corruption. I'd be very interested in what we were going to use it for here, because I really don't want to see us
There's
go.
2 projects in Clark County. There's the waterfront project south of the Hilton. That's one project. And the library project Killian's we're doing is also a lift project.
That's for the garage.
Yeah.
I just sent everybody a link or an email to the, what do they call it, the bill analysis from the House staff, HB 2349. It's one of the longest analyses I've seen. It's a 5-page analysis on the bill, and it'll give you a lot of detail about exactly what this particular mechanism is. It's contrasted to tax increment financing because it's not the same.
Right, it's very much not the same.
But just assume for the sake of argument that we had some place we could put together a tax increment, lift or whatever you want to call it. And I guess it's tax increment financing is a phrase you can't use.
Right.
But if we is there any place we could make use of that here? Is there places that we need infrastructure that?
Yes, potentially. The 2 I would think of right away are the jobs lands that we've identified on Woodburn Hill
In Norway.
and Norway. A lot of analysis would have to go into that, but we have a significant project just to get the transportation infrastructure up the hill and over to the east to that ground, and all of the some of the other infrastructure as well. And if you had a partner, like oftentimes there's a partner, private property owner who's ready to do something or wants to do something, how do you make that happen? So like the library project in Vancouver, we wanted structured parking to go with that project and to make it pencil on the private side. That parking is very, very expensive. This lift pilot was the catalyst that got that going. Then the recession happened.
Yep.
So the parking garage is not constructed, but the library is constructed, and I think there's been extensions and extensions on the lift. There were a couple of other, I think there were 5 projects statewide. For the waterfront, I think it was very helpful because just like we have the railroad berm. So Vancouver, like Washougal, is cut off from its waterfront in the downtown area. And so they needed to punch through the berm, and to do that, used this and other tools.
Top 12 other sources of funds for it.
Right. It was a very complex, and working with BNSF, which is always fun,
I had to go back to Fort Worth on that one.
You did? Yeah.
I'll be interested to see what the differences are, but the similarity I see in this and the tax increment financing that Oregon and other states use is that it's a gamble. You're betting on property values going up. That doesn't always happen.
That's exactly right.
So I'll be interested in the differences, but that's a major similarity that I see, and that's almost a deal breaker for me right there.
The difference is this bill is really very much limited to certain kinds of infrastructure. And
Who's putting it forward, Paul?
I don't know the answer to that. It's a bill that, it's something that AWC has been working on in one way or another for years. LIFT was one of the things that we got forward because imagine that the Hamilton property was right in the middle of your downtown, and you need to clean it up and put water, sewer, and streets into it to turn it into a developable property. Some of the general Puget Sound area cities, that was very much what was on the table. Either abandoned industrial lands, or in one case, I think it was a mall the size of Van Mall that had been literally abandoned and turned over for property taxes. So the city owns it, but what are they going to do with it unless they've got some means of financing the tear down and the utilities and the roads that go in there. And I heard that project raised. I don't have any idea what happened to it. That was 6 or 7 years ago. So the short question was, is anybody else interested in going up to Olympia?
I can't do it this week, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I can't get out of work.
That's it?
Anything else from council?
Well, we went to the economic forecast breakfast on last Wednesday, and that was pretty interesting. And the one thing that I would like to, well, the one thing I found most interesting is high-tech type development is taking off again in California. And they're to the point now where it's getting to be really expensive to buy land down there. And here in the what I call the Washougal, Vancouver, Portland metro area, we are the.
Why do you include those other two cities?
I just put us first. We are the cheapest place to do business on the West Coast. Probably more on the Washington side than the Oregon side. And we have a lot of industrial land here, some of the largest parcels around, and I think we ought to be marketing those heavily in California.
Yeah,
That's what I gleaned from the whole. And you were there when
Was
Alicia.
Rita there?
Oh, yeah, the Alicia from Portland, Inc., Greater Portland, Inc., was down in California on a trip. And if you've been reading the newspapers, one of the things that's going on in California is that places like Google, there's no housing close to Google, literally none. So people are living in San Francisco, and Google has buses that literally pull in to the bus stops in front of BART, in front of the transit district buses, pick up the Google people and take them down to South Bay area and then bring them back. And of course, it's driven up apartment and housing prices in San Francisco about 25% over the past year, which there's getting to be a lot of local pushback on that. People are saying very nasty things about Google, and the city council is about to get involved. And so companies like Google and Apple and Hewlett-Packard and all of those other, IBM, all those other big Silicon Valley corporations are saying, you know, we've gotten so big that we've literally run out of space here. We have to move. And then there's the problem like Ken Fisher said about he goes into Foster. He employs 1,400 people in Foster City, California. He goes into City Hall to talk to them about a project he wants to do. And number one, they tell him to take a number. And number two, the very first thing they're going to do is tell him why he can't do what he wants to do. And when he came to Camas, they came out from behind the county. They still didn't know who he was. Came out from behind the county and said, "Hi, how can we help you?" And that's the difference between what's going on in California right now and what's going on here, and it's not lost on the companies.
Did you notice that Quita was at that meeting?
I didn't see Paul Dennis there.
No. I didn't see anybody from Camas there. All three port commissioners and Dave Ripp were there.
Well, thank you for taking this one on. I'll be interested to see what you find out.
Well, the Public Works Trust Fund is the one that I'm interested in.
Yeah. And rightfully so.
Any other items? We are adjourned till 7.